Howdy, howdy, howdy. Let's try this again. Let's see if I got a good connection this time. I've been having trouble with my internet the last couple of days. So let's see what this. Pick it. Is it working? I can't tell. It looks like it is. Okay. Bear with me here for a second. I'm trying to see if my internet is indeed working or not, and where not I am still, if I am live on YouTube and Rumble now. Looks like I am on Rumble. YouTube? I don't know. Yep, I'm a professional penguin YouTuber. Not. Come on. Crazy thing. Okay, let me look at something else real quick here. Okay, let's see if let me just play some little clips and see if that's working or not. Let's try.
Yo, what's up, penguins?
You can hear me? Okay. Yeah, I've been having trouble with the internet, Tracy. So it's like, oh, I ain't going there. I ain't messing with audio. Get over it. I got one problem at a time. Right now, I'm trying to see if the internet's still going to be working or not. Turn me up if you can't hear me. Okay, let's see here. Yeah, well, you may have to do that. I don't know, because you can try seeing if the Rumble stream's any better. It could be. I don't know. It seems like because Rumble didn't go down, but YouTube did. I was also trying to stream also the Kick, and I just ended the Kick stream period because I think it's too much for my internet to be able to handle. I think my internet is having trouble in the first place. I was also trying a new service, and I finally went back to using Streamster. Although I have problems with Streamster too, but at least Streamster's working at the moment. All right, let's try something else real quick here. Here's a good one.
I love cheese. I love cheese. I love cheese. I love cheese so much. Yeah. I love cheese so much. So give me some nom 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 nom.
I love cheese. Okie dokie. I love cheese. All right. Let's see if I can continue on with what I was originally going to do today. Let's see here. Gotta go to here. Go to here. Okay, and first thing I want to talk about real quick is, if you didn't know, my all-time video game, which I had trouble, I couldn't stream it. I tried to stream it last night. My internet didn't want to cooperate. So I wound up not streaming it. But yesterday, Hello Games, who makes No Man's Sky, released their 13th expedition update called Adrift. And bring that up here. No Man's Sky Adrift. And the cool thing I like about it is, I'm not going to play the trailer on this. There is a ship in this that reminds me of the Mandalorian Razor Crest, which I'm not surprised, because one of the reasons why I like No Man's Sky so much is because I honestly believe that Hello Games and Sean Murray and his team are all geeks like I am, because if you ever play the game, there's stuff in it that looks like Star Wars, like Star Trek, Stargate. Okay, cool. I'm glad. I think that's YouTube, because I didn't change anything on my audio. I changed nothing on my audio, which I know for a fact that there are problems sometimes when it comes to streaming services like YouTube and Rumble and things like that, that they will putz with your audio. I had that trouble with Twitch. So it is what it is. I have no control over that part of it. All I can control is my end of it. And I didn't mess with the audio, so guess what? In this case, it had to be YouTube. Anyway, I'm looking forward to trying to play this later on tonight. If my internet will cooperate, I want to stream this over on Twitch, and we'll go from there. Because I want to play this, and I want to get that new ship. But there's an article come out about it. I want to read a little bit about the Adrift. Why has it got that prop up? Okay. This isn't even something I was going to cover today. I just thought I'd throw it in there. No Man's Sky Adrift update leaves you completely alone in its universe, except for sandworms and ghost ships. And I haven't checked it out, so I don't know what it looks like yet. I've been waiting to try to stream it. And so I'm going to try to do that hopefully tonight. But basically, the gist of it I get is it's going to kind of give you the feel a little bit of what it was like when the game first came out. You're going to be left on your own, to your own devices. No NPCs, no space stations, no space anomaly, no help of any kind. You're kind of just on your own in this alternate universe. So that should be kind of interesting. Anyway, let's get into what I was going to talk about today. And I'm going to talk about that Disney is still failing. Shocker! Disney's been failing for like years, I think. They've been going down the tubes, and they just keep continuing pushing and kicking the can down the road with their woke agenda and their SJW stuff and their bad storytelling. And I don't know. It just seems like that they're just making content to make content's sake, and they just are. They eventually got, in my opinion, to run out of money. Just all there is to it. They can't keep going at this pace. So anyway, let's get into my first little article here about this. It's actually got a little tiny video in it as well. And it says right here that Nelson Peltz. If you don't know who Nelson Peltz is, Nelson Peltz was a Disney shareholder that a while back, about a couple months ago, in the last shareholders meeting, was trying to get a position on the board, Disney's board, and wound up losing the proxy fight. Well, because of it, I guess Nelson Peltz, who's a millionaire, has decided to take his business elsewhere and pulled all his Disney stock, sold it all. So let's watch this little video.
A news alert here on Disney. Scott Wapner's got the details. Hey, Scott.
Hey, Melissa. Thanks so much. Well, the news is that I'm told from a source that Trian's Nelson Peltz is out of Disney stock completely, and that he sold all of his stock at close to $120 a share. I think if we look at Disney now, it's about $100, almost even. It's such interesting news. I mean, we're reporting this now, but it's going to be reflected, of course, when the 13Fs come out, when the next release of those happens. And as all of you know, he has a long history in this name. I don't think anybody can forget when he famously ended his first proxy fight live on CNBC last year, and then he waged another one. He recently lost that vote with some 31% of the vote, and said at the time that he could be back if Bob Iger failed to, quote, keep his promises. Trian made about $1 billion in the investment, so it was a good investment for the firm, though obviously frustrating given the results of the proxy fight.
Now, Nelson Peltz was working with Elon Musk and so forth, and was in the process of trying to kind of get a foothold in Disney to try to make the company back to be profitable again. I don't think he cares about the actual, I don't think Nelson Peltz really cares about like the woke agenda or SJW stuff or the political stuff or anything. He's a businessman. I think he's just concerned about making money. And I think this speaks volumes to Disney has he's a major stockholder. He's jumping ship. How much longer is it going to be before hopefully other shareholders, decide to jump ship as well? I'm not a financial penguin, but I know this much, that eventually when the financial money runs dry, Disney's going to have to do something to redo their company. Otherwise, their company's going to close their doors. I mean, it just makes common sense. Think about it. You have $20 in your wallet. You spend all $20. What do you got left? You got nothing in your wallet. You've got to find a way to try to make income. And Disney is definitely not doing that right now. Continuing on with this little bit of story here. This also came out a couple days ago. There is a Disney director that was involved in a lot of the Disney animation films that believes that Disney needs to course correct away from the political message. The director, John Musker, I never really knew who that was until I came across this article. But it says animated filmmaker John Musker, who directed such Disney films as The Little Mermaid. That's not this Little Mermaid. It's not the live action, but it's the animated Little Mermaid. Okay? He directed that, Aladdin, Hercules, several others as well. Has called out the Walt Disney Company for prioritizing political messaging over story in its recent films. This is someone that was in Disney's past that has made Disney successful. I mean, I loved all those little movies, like Aladdin and Hercules and Little Mermaid and so forth. Not the live action stuff, but the animated films. I mean, that was what Disney's bread and butter was, the animated films. He goes on and says, I think they need to do a course correction a bit in terms of putting the message secondary, behind entertainment, a compelling story, and engaging characters. Musker told Spanish outlet El Pas in the year's Animeo International Summit in Gran Canaria, Gran Canitas, Spain. I don't know how to pronounce things. The classic Disney films didn't start out trying to have a message. They wanted you to get involved in the characters and the story and the world building. And I think that's still at the heart of it, Musker added. You don't have to exclude agendas, but you have to first create characters who sympathize with and who are compelling. Exactly. That's what I've been saying all along. You know what? It doesn't matter what color their skin someone is or whether or not what their identity is or their sexual preference or whatever it is in a story, as long as the story is the main focus. The other stuff can come secondary. I mean, we used to have strong women as well as strong men in stories, and now it's kind of like the exact opposite of all that. But it's not even a good story when they do that. Instead, it's about pushing some type of political agenda or narrative, especially from Disney. Musker has collaborated with fellow directors on several Disney animated features like The Great Mouse Detective. That was one of my favorite because it's kind of like a Sherlock Holmes kind of like thing. I love Sherlock Holmes. I really do. He's been one of my all-time characters forever. I've when I was growing up, I read a lot of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. I read a lot of Sherlock Holmes things like that. I always found that stuff so intriguing to me. The art of observation and detection. The Little Mermaid, Aladdin, Hercules, Treasure Planet, Moana. Yeah, The Great Mouse Detective. Exactly. I even watched several of these movies with my little goslings when I was raising them, my two boys. Anyway, I just find it interesting that a former animated film director, John Musker, comes out and says, look, if you want to push this political agenda, fine. Do it after the fact. Make the story being the most important thing. And that's all most of us are in the pop culture war really want in the first place, is just make a good, compelling, immersive story and let the chips fall where they may with everything else. Because it's not meant to be an activist movement. It's meant to be a distraction from everyday life. It's our downtime. All right, so switching gears here. We're going to be talking about George Lucas and some of the things he said about Star Wars. But before I get into that, we're going to talk about one of Tracy's favorite people, Potato Kennedy. And there's some things she said, of course, coming out with the new Lucasfilm series, The Acolyte, comes out on June 4th. And yeah, take a sip. Sip them if you got them. I'm going to sip my iced coffee. Okay. One moment, I think my internet may be tanking again. Let me look at something real quick. And this is getting frustrating. All right, hold on here. All right, let's see if that's any better. Blasted. I'm really getting frustrated today. All right. Let's see if that holds up or not. Man, I hope so, because I really wanted to watch the George Lucas interview at the Cannes Film Festival where he got an award, and he talks about several things about his Star Wars and what Disney has done to it. Anyway, Lucasfilm boss Potato Kennedy, that's my name for Kathleen Kennedy. Potato Kennedy says a lot of women in Star Wars struggle with fan attacks because of the fan base being so male dominated. Well, Star Wars starting out was predominantly a male IP. Doesn't mean that women haven't enjoyed it. It's just that, come on, what do you expect? Anyway, and it says right here, a new interview with the New York Times for the upcoming Star Wars series, The Acolyte, or what I lovingly call the Pedialyte. Lucasfilm president Potato Kennedy said she is aware that women in the space franchise are often attacked online more than men because of the fan base being so male-dominated. Now, I'm seeing right through this. She's doing like she has always done in the past. They're trying to get ahead of the, quote, hate that fans are supposed to be so toxic and everything. And when Acolyte, which releases on June 4th, is going to probably tank and going to be bad, they can then get ahead of this and try to blame the fans for it instead of taking responsibility for them making a bad, story-driven show that's a political agenda show. Female stars Daisy Ridley and Kelly Marie Tran certainly faced online harassment from toxic fans when the most recent Star Wars film trilogy was released. And now The Acolyte is already being attacked in certain corners of the fandom. Really? How about when you went after Gina Carano? What about that one? Anyway. The Acolyte is an original story created by Leslie Headland. Yeah. She's a trip. That's set long before the events of The Phantom Menace. Headland, known for directing films such as Sleeping with Other People, Oh Joy, and co-creating Netflix hit comedy series Russian Doll, is the first woman to serve as a showrunner as a Star Wars series. Really? Like that matters. Her show includes major new female stars, characters played by the likes of Amanda Stenberg, Cara Ann Moss, and Jodie Turner-Smith. Whoopee. I don't really care. Because what I know is it's just going to be the Force is female, no good story. Maybe I would care more about this if it was actually a good story, but I just have a gut feeling it's going to be terrible. Just like everything else that Lucasfilm has currently released. Anyway. As reported by the Times, a loud primordial part of the Star Wars fandom has pushed back in predictable fashion against the show. Why are there so many women, girls, and minority characters increasingly dominating the ranks of Jedi? Reads a comment on the Acolyte trailer, with others expressing a similar worldview. Some trolls have nicknamed Headland's series the Wokealite. Like I called it the Pedialyte. The Wokealite, that works too. My belief is that storytelling does not need to be representative of all people. Kennedy told the publication about her support for Headland's Acolyte vision. That's an easy decision for me. You know what's funny is, she says that, but then the first minute that the show comes out and gets a bad review, or they're the first ones to complain, well, why isn't everybody watching it? Well, you're right here saying that storytelling doesn't have to be representative of all people. You make it all female-oriented, you're kind of leaving out the other half of the gender out there. I don't know. It just doesn't make much sense to me. Anyway, The Acolyte premieres on June 4th on Disney Plus. I personally not looking forward to it. Take a look at this. This is a post up on Twitter by Screen Time. The Acolyte budget is reportedly around $180 million. For a Disney Plus show, by the way. Season 1, 8 episodes. Each episode is about 30 minutes. Took 4 years to make. And the story takes place approximately 100 years before the Phantom Menace. I don't know. I just don't think it's going to be all that good. But George Lucas has got some ideas probably on why it's not that good. Right here. George Lucas is reportedly saying nobody understood the Force. George Lucas says new Star Wars movies lost sight of originals' ideas. Imagine that. George Lucas, the guy who created Star Wars. Newsflash for you, it's not Disney who created it. George Lucas comments on what's changed with Star Wars movies since he sold Lucasfilm to Disney. It says right here, George Lucas reflects on Disney Star Wars after he sold Lucasfilm to Disney for $4 billion in 2012. Over the past decade, both fans and Lucas himself have expressed mixed reactions to the direction Disney has taken with the beloved galaxy far, far away. Now, if you don't know, part of that $4 billion, he got $2 billion of it in Disney stock. So Lucas does have somewhat of an investment for them to be successful. So he can, this is kind of like his little retirement. He's 80 some odd years old. I don't see him ever coming back to direct. I see him as retired. Lucas recently opened up about his feelings towards Star Wars sequels and spinoffs produced under Disney's leadership in an interview with The Hollywood Reporter. By the way, all the articles and everything I'm discussing are down in the description of the video and the live stream, so you can actually take a look for yourself. Don't take my word for it. Read it for yourself. Right here it says, I was the only one who really knew what Star Wars was, who actually knew this world because there's a lot to it. The Force, for example. Nobody understood the Force, Lucas commented. He feels that essential elements of his original trilogy have been lost in translation. Despite these sentiments, Lucas acknowledges the necessity of moving on once a creation is handed over, saying, you give it up, you give it up. Even though Lucas believes some of the essence of his originals is missing in Disney's projects, he continues to stay connected to the Star Wars universe. One moment, I'm just plagued with nothing but technical issues today. It's Technical Issues Thursday. Anyway. Okay, so let's see here. George frequently visits sets and provides consultation to filmmakers, maintaining a presence in the ongoing expansion of his creation. Lucas worked as a creative consultant on the Star Wars sequel trilogy's first film, The Force Awakens. He also visited the set of Star Wars Andor. And in my opinion, pretty much out of all the Disney Star Wars that Disney has done, Andor really feels like the most Star Wars to me. And it's because it's not part of the volume. They actually used real sets like what Lucas did and so forth. The Star Wars creator was also noted as a fan of Rogue One. I liked Rogue One. Didn't like Solo, but I did like Rogue One. The essential theme of Star Wars is the concept of balancing the Force. an idea Lucas has discussed extensively. The Force is the lifeblood of the Star Wars universe, connecting every being. Misunderstandings about what it means to balance the Force have proliferated, especially with interpretations suggesting a balance between the light and dark sides akin to yin and yang. Yeah, and it's obvious to me when you look at Disney Star Wars, not Star Wars, but Disney Star Wars. Disney doesn't understand that. They just think anybody could be a Force user. Anybody could be a Jedi. Everybody could be a lightsaber wielder, a Force user. It doesn't quite work that way. Lucas refutes this notion in a 2010 meeting with the writers of Star Wars: The Clone Wars. He explained that the dark side is an unnatural distortion of the Force. What happens when you go to the dark side is it goes out of balance. And then you get really selfish. When you get selfish, you get stuff. Or you want stuff, and when you want stuff, you get stuff. Then you get afraid that somebody's going to take it away from you. Once you become afraid that somebody's going to take it away from you, or you're going to lose it, then you start to become angry. And that anger leads to hate, and hate leads to suffering. And we saw that in how Anakin, the story of Anakin is a good example of this. Anakin was afraid of losing Padme. So when Palpatine gave him an alternative, he decided to go that direction to save her. And then what we see? We see Anakin with yellow eyes, indicating that the dark side of the Force has inhabited him. He becomes angry. He starts killing all the younglings, and eventually turns into Vader. We saw that. In Lucas' view, the light side represents the true nature of the Force. The dark side is a corruption brought on by selfishness and greed. He emphasized that the pursuit of these vices is fleeting and ultimately destructive. He even goes into that. There's a good episode that one of these days I want to talk about in the Clone Wars that really goes into this on the planet of Mortis, when you got these two representatives of the Force being the light and the dark side. So here is the Hollywood Reporter article. I'm not going to read a lot about this because a lot of this is covered in the little video we are going to watch here. He will say this. George Lucas says ideas in the original sort of got lost in post-Disney Star Wars films and in all Lucasfilms Star Wars type stuff, I honestly believe. Lucas says, I'm a stubborn guy and I didn't want people to tell me how to make my movies. It's how Star Wars creator George Lucas summed up the secret to his success. Speaking to a crowd of fans at a packed Debussy Theater in Cannes on Friday afternoon. That's the video we're going to watch here in a little bit. It's about an hour and a half. And I'm going to watch it and I'm going to talk about it. Give my comments throughout it, kind of a reaction. The 80-year-old filmmaker was being honored at the 77th Cannes Festival with a Palme d'Or for his contribution to cinema, and the crowd, a much younger cohort that is usually seen at these events, whooped and hollered as Lucas walked on the stage. They were rapt as he sat down for a wide-ranging discussion of his life in the movie business. Let's go ahead and get into that. Before we get into this, though, go ahead and take a sip of iced coffee. Because we need it. We're going to be here for a little bit. I have seen some of this, but not all of it. So I'm going to be watching some of this with you as well for the first time. Let's get into it. This is also on the link to this video is down in the description. And shout out to that Shelf, who is providing this video on their YouTube channel. Anyway, there he is, the man, the myth, the legend. Yeah, you and your hot coffee. You can tell they like him. Shocker.
Je voudrais aussi saluer la présence dans la salle du grand monteur Walter Meurtre, qui est ici.
All right, let's skip ahead here a little bit. I don't understand the French anyway. Okay, let's
Very simple. Comment ça va? How are you?
Fine. It's great to be here. I mean, my old classmate and co-writer and co-editor and co-everything, Walter Murch is in the audience. We were here 52 years ago when we brought THX. He did all the sound and I did all the editing. And we wrote the screenplay together. And it's quite
yeah. I don't know anything about French.
Okay, let's start with this. Let's start with Cannes and the homage you mentioned getting this year with a Palme d'Or, an Ori Palme d'Or. Just what does that mean for you? What does Cannes mean for you?
what does this mean for me?
Being in Cannes, getting the homage and the Palme d'Or.
Well, it's nostalgic, but it's also a great honor because, I've obviously been back a few times before with Indiana Jones and Star Wars and whatnot, but it's
not his first time being there.
Obviously we have a lot of fans and all that kind of stuff, but in terms of awards and stuff, it's I don't make the kind of movies that win awards.
That's the thing. I mean, I want to go back in time, and I want to start with your friend Steven Spielberg movie, The Fabelmans. In The Fabelmans, there is a scene where the young Steven remembers that he fell in love with cinema watching The Greatest Show on Earth. Is there a moment like that for you as a kid? Is it a movie or a scene, something you've seen that made you say, I want to make movies now?
Well, when I started out, I didn't do that well in high school, so I went to junior college for a couple of years and mostly studied anthropology and social sciences.
Anthropology? I never knew that. He studied anthropology.
And I fell in love with that. Before that time, I did try to go to an art school and learn.
Dude, look at there's a camera right here. That's it. Just sit it down in front of everything. Sorry.
An illustrator, and I was I did a lot of photography. I had my own dark room, and I did that a lot. So a friend of mine was going to go take the test to go to USC. He was a business major that I'd grown up with, and he said, "Oh, come with me." And, I don't remember drive all the way to Sacramento. They didn't have SATs in those days. So I said, "Okay, I'll do it." And I went, and lo and behold, I passed the test. And I said, "Well, what am I going to take? I don't know what they have in an anthropology department." And he said, "Well, they have a photography department, and you love photography."
Photography.
Said, "Okay, well,
there we go. Better
that's
view.
my major." And but it wasn't. I got there, and it was not a photography department. It was a cinema department where they made movies. I said,
"Ooh, a cinema department." So one photography is actually learning how to make cinema there.
"This is nuts. You go to college to make movies?" And in those days, the USC has been around since the 20s, and there were only like a few dozen film schools at that point. And, but I got there and took a history class and an animation class, and then I had to make a lot of other, science and language and all that stuff. But I fell in love with it immediately. It was like, that was the moment I said, this is for me. I love this. So that was, because I didn't know, I come from a small town in Central California, a rural, farming community, and we didn't get foreign films or anything. We just, we had two theaters. One was a B movie theater, Roger Corman films, and an A movie theater, which had all the Hollywood films. And on weekends, once I could drive, I would drive to San Francisco and see more avant-garde films.
Can you imagine if he didn't love film?
And
I don't know about you, but my childhood would never been the same, because I grew up with Star Wars. This kind of dates how old I am, but I was 7 years old when Star Wars came out in the theaters, and my parents took me to go see it.
the people who
And it
were
became a
making
part of my life.
kind of art films. And I said, that's what I want to do. So I went to film school, and I made...
And that's why it bothers me so much what Disney
Sort
does.
of tone poems or art films or whatever. They didn't have a, the stories, but it was very, just a film about motion and a film about that sort of thing. And that's what I wanted to do. And so that's what I did when I was in school. And then, but I was very successful at it. There were student films, student film festivals, and I started winning lots and lots of awards. So
Nice.
And I made one which was like a 15-minute film called THX 1138.
Yes.
And then the first film I made was an animated film called Look at Life, and that won a gazillion awards. And I just said, I
A gazillion awards.
Kind of a hero in the department, because I could do this stuff. So it's from the...
Oh, by the way, just to let you know, down here, that shelf kind of gives a breakdown with chapter markers of all the things he's going to talk about. Like, for example, why Lucas loves chase scenes and the origin of Star Wars, which is not until like 21 minutes in. Right now, we're talking about his career beginnings, I believe. And we may skip some of this. I don't know, because I'm more interested, to be honest with you, in his thought processes on like Star Wars and things like that. But we'll just continue on here and let it go for a little bit, then we might skip around some.
From there, I won a couple scholarships. And then I met Francis Coppola, who was directing Thing in the Rainbow, and I was just a student observer. And I was bored to death. I said, I don't want to make Hollywood movies. I don't want to, I know how to do this. I was already had another scholarship with Columbia, with Carl Foreman. And I said, I've seen how they make me. I'm not interested. They said, well, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to go over to the animation department and see if I can get a couple short ends. There was nobody there. The studio had closed down completely and had been sold to Seven Arts. The day I arrived was Jack Warner was leaving. So he was walking out as I was walking in. And
Wow.
it was deserted. Usually with these scholarships, you'd say, well, what department would you want to be in? Oh, I'd like to write screenplays, or I'd like to use the camera, and they'd give you that. But there wasn't anything there. So they stuck me over there with Francis, and he said, you look awfully bored. I said, I am bored. I'm going to go with the animation program. And he said, wait.
He told Francis Coppola he's bored.
Stay here, I'll give you something to do, and it won't be that boring.
I just find that funny.
So, we were the only two people on the crew that was, under 60 years old. We both had beards, we both went to film schools. So we were a completely different group than the crew and everybody. So that was my moment. And from then on, I was Francis's assistant, and then I moved on.
But at this time, sorry, not only at USC, but in this period, you created a group that will change Hollywood, American cinema, and cinema forever. By the way, Paul Schrader was here last week with a movie, and he published on the internet a photo of you, Francis, and Paul, and he said about time together again. This group that we created is what we call the New Hollywood. Did you realize at the time that you guys were changing everything, every rule, that you were proving to the studios that we can be independent and still make movies that can make money?
I think he's trying to ask you whether or not they realized at the time that they were doing this, were they actually being like revolutionary in filmmaking and so forth.
Well, to be very honest with you, we weren't really that interested in making money. We were interested in making movies.
Yeah, now he said that before over the years, that he was never really interested in making money. It was all about the art, about the story he had to tell.
That was a big difference, because we all love movies. That was the same thing at USC Film School. You couldn't get into the movie business. It just was not possible. You were, unless you were a relative or you knew somebody and they pushed you in there, you couldn't go to the studios. It was just completely locked out. So none of us really thought we were ever going to make movies. And even our camera instructor, we came in and he said, "How many of you guys want to make films?" Everybody raised their hand. None of you are going to get make films. That's about as far as we're going to get. So if you want to make films, this is a hopeless exercise, and you're going to waste 2 years and forget it. So
wow, that's really encouraging, wasn't it?
But the secret was that we all loved movies, and all we really wanted to do was make movies, even if they were just short films at school. And that was a magic time in Hollywood, which is where USC is, where the people who founded Hollywood and founded the studios, they were all retiring, because this was in the mid-60s. And in the 60s, they were all in their mid-70s or 80s, and they were leaving, and so the studios were bought up by companies like Coca-Cola and Gulf Western, and regular corporations, and they said, "Well, what do we do now? We don't know how to make movies." And they said, "Well, let's hire some agents and people that know how to make movies." But basically, they hired a lot of kids. So where we couldn't get in before, they started hiring people from film schools. Like, they must know what they're doing. Little did they know.
Yeah, right.
So,
make it up as they go along.
after Finian's Rainbow, Francis wanted to do a little movie, and we outfitted a truck, and he went to we were going to go around the country. He was going to shoot this movie. He had a script, but we didn't have any locations, we didn't have anything. It was like 12 people. It was a very small movie. And so we get in the truck and we drive across country, starting in Great Neck, New York, and going all across the country. And then we'd stop, the art department would go ahead and say, "I found a good location for this scene, let's do that." And so in the end, we ended up in Oglala, Nebraska, in a warehouse where we were shooting.
Not to me, they're just kind of making it up as they go along.
And Franklin said, "Well, what are you going to do after we finish this?"
I mean, they had a script, but they didn't really necessarily, I guess, have a plan on what they wanted to do with it.
And
per se.
I'm going to make
Interesting.
Kenyan cinema kind of movies, non-story movies. And he said, "Well, stick with me, write a script for the movie you want to do, and I'll try to get it made." I said, "Okay." Little did I know that I was getting paid what they gave him for me to write the script in order for me to be the catch-all assistant on the movie. But that's really how I got into it. And then I...
All right, let's switch gears here to... Let's go to the origin of Star Wars.
This anyway.
All right, let's start with Star Wars. The origin, the story itself. I know you had a lot of trouble to get the story right, and it took you some time to write it down. When did you know that you got it? When did you know that the characters were there, that Leia was the right one, and Darth Vader and everything? When did you got it in your mind? Is there a click, a moment?
No, it was, in the beginning, I had wanted to, the way I described it is it's sort of a Flash Gordon kind of thing. It's a fantasy. It's the kind of movies they made in the 20s and 30s. So it's going to be like a 30s movie, but it's a little crazy. And wait a minute, we're talking about American Graffiti, right?
Star Wars.
Oh, Star Wars. Well,
Star Wars.
American Graffiti.
He didn't know what we were talking about.
I had talked to the guys at United Artists. He said, no, Walter and I were coming here. So I said, well, I'm going to stop over in New York. Francis is shooting The Godfather, and I'll stay with him. And, he's having a very, very hard time. The studio was just, wanting to do horrible things. And he was fighting. And so, and his wife was pregnant, and I was in the apartment, sleeping, and suddenly they came running through one morning and said, she's gonna have the baby, and it was my birthday, which was a week or so ago, and I said, great, but then I was on my way here, so I said, I have to go on to Cannes, I will, and I talked to, I think it was King Features, but it was whoever owned Flash Gordon, and so I went and talked and see if I could buy it and get the rights to it. They said, no. This is an important project for us. We're going to have Fellini do it for us. And I said, oh, okay.
Did he just say he tried to buy the rights to Flash Gordon? I did not ever know that.
And then I realized that I didn't really want to do Flash Gordon anyway. I wanted to make up my own movie. I was going to change it so much, they'd be very mad at me and I'd be doing nothing but trouble. So I came here.
Okay, I thought I heard correctly. Thanks, Tracy.
Made a deal with United Artists for American Graffiti. And he said, well, what else you got? Because they want to own you for the rest of your life. So I said, well, I got this space fantasy movie. It's kind of a 1920s, 30s Republic serial, and it's got like alien dogs flying spaceships and all kinds of things. It's really crazy. And so he said, oh, we'll take it.
We'll take it?
So
and that's Star Wars, baby.
Graffiti, and they said, no. This is just a musical. This is just a music video. There's nothing going on in it. And I said, well, okay. And then I had to fight for a year in order to go to all the other studios with the script. And, everybody said no. And finally Universal said maybe. They were just on the back end of the Easy Rider phenomenon. Easy Rider had a huge effect on all of us making offbeat movies, especially for young people. Because they didn't know anything about young people. So we don't know that. So, and Francis was selling it, American Zoetrope, this is a young people. We're going to make lots of young movies. He was, he worked for Roger Corman. Roger Corman was like the ambassador of getting into the film business because he's the only person that would hire young directors and let them actually write scripts and make movies without, go do it. Here's 27 days. You have $150,000. go to it. And, but there's a lot of directors that made their first movie there. And so that was what Francis we were trying to do at Zoetrope. And, but finally, Universal at the end of their thing said, we'll do American Graffiti. And
wow.
So that, and then, I don't know, I'm going to
American Graffiti we made
American Graffiti
did very well and
well,
multiple Oscar nomination.
The thing about American Graffiti when I made it, all these films, you know, THX, the studio just, you know, it was called a cult classic because people would sort of drop acid and watch it and say, wow, this is better than 2001.
Drop acid and watch it? What? Wait a minute. I don't want to really, I mean, I know a little bit about American Graffiti, but I'm still more interested in the Star Wars stuff, and he keeps kind of going back and forth on this. So let's switch over to how Star Wars got greenlit.
At the same time, when I did the last screening for the production, Alan Ladd Jr., who was the head of production and everything at Fox.
I have never dropped acid either.
Which I don't know what's happened to anybody else. Maybe, you know, Stanley Kubrick, but he came up and said, I like that movie, American Graffiti. I like it. I want to do it. I'll do anything you want to do. You got any other movies? And I said, well, I got this sort of science fiction, fantasy, crazy 1930s movie. And he went, you know, which I told him that we have dogs driving like spaceships and stuff. And he said, I'll do it. I'll do it. Whatever you want. I'll do it. I said, you're a good director. I want to work with you. So he did. He hired me, and the rest is kind of history. He was the only one, he and two other people. One was the head of marketing, and the other one was his assistant, who was the vice president of production. They all had faith in the movie. Nobody else did. The studio didn't. They were going bankrupt anyway, but they had a lot of movies that they...
Well, you also got to think about this, too. When Star Wars came out, what was the number one genre currently in movies? Westerns. Westerns were big back then. So this was kind of going out of the norm. I mean, Star Wars was kind of like in the same type of area as like Star Trek was. It was, Westerns were the dominant genre, and to come up with something that was sci-fi was just kind of out of the norm. So it's really kind of amazing that he got this going.
You know, they were desperate, but they said, this will never work. This just isn't going to work. And then when I showed it to them, finished, they said, to the board of directors, they said, oh, we hate this movie. This is such a stupid movie. We don't want this movie. And so they tried to sell it off, but in the end, Laddie and those guys, the thing, they said we were going to release it, but they released it in...
Oh, yeah, John Wayne, the Duke.
70...
Yes, he was the king of the big screen back then. Yes, he was.
Brand thing, which was a way of saying they weren't going to let him release it in a lot of theaters. But we did, and again, just like American Graffiti, there were lines around the block, everybody went crazy, and then Fox was saying, my God, we got to put this in more theaters. So it went from very few theaters.
32 at the beginning, was it?
Huh?
32 theaters?
32 theaters to over 1,000, which was unheard of at that time. And it was, you know, making a fortune. So, but no.
Yeah, I actually remember standing in line. I was impatient. I was only 7. But I remember standing in line with my parents on that, getting bored out of my mind.
Well, none of those movies from that period were accepted by the studios. And of course I made them like Star Wars I made in England. So I was away from the studio. They had a person there, but eventually he gave up trying to tell us what to do. But because I was from San Francisco, I had my own production company. You know, that was what happened. And at the time, before it came out, I was having to talk with Laddie, who were trying to figure out some of the release, and I said, you know, in order to, something that I guess some people are interested in, when I was making the movie, American Graffiti, you only get net. Net in a studio deal was doom. You could not make money with net. You could only make it with gross. The only people who got gross were big-time stars: Barbra Streisand, Steve McQueen, Paul Newman. But nobody on the crew, no directors, nobody could get gross. You only got net. And net, they would they just keep adding stuff onto the budget until it never paid off. It just never, ever paid off. And so it was like fool's gold. And, I knew that. But American Graffiti made money so fast that I actually made a lot of money. And it was the first time I think anybody had ever made money on net. So when and while that was happening,
I wonder how much, just out of curiosity, $140 million American Graffiti made. Wow. That is crazy. And if you want to go see it, you can watch it on Netflix even. Wow, I didn't know that. It's currently on Netflix. Okay. So he did make bank on American Graffiti. I didn't realize he did. I just knew the film was successful. I didn't know it was that successful. 140 million back then. I mean, you're talking 1973 here. If you account that for like inflation, you're talking maybe what, like 350, 400, 450 million in today's standard, maybe? I don't know.
I'm
not a math guy.
And by the time I finished it, it took me about a year to write it, and because American Graffiti, it was nominated for Academy Awards, it was all, I was constantly doing stuff, which isn't really an excuse, but besides me procrastinating, it took a while. But that was, I went to Fox, and they were, because all I had was like an 8-page deal memo. Said, well, you're going to get 50% of the net, you're going to get, we're going to pay you $100,000 to write and direct. And, it was just a standard deal, because it was done before American Graffiti came out. And so when American Graffiti came out, it was this huge hit, and then suddenly I was the hottest thing in Hollywood. I went to them, and I said, look, we're going to give, the distribution agreement is an 80-page document. So I went to my lawyer, and I said, we're going to write that contract. And he said, you're crazy. You know how much work that is? I said, look, this is the only time you'll ever get to do this, and it'll be the last time anybody ever gets to do this. So let's take advantage of the fact that we can write the contract. And, of course, the other films, I didn't get any advertising. I didn't, So what I decided is, well, when we went through it, the only two things that made any difference whatsoever, which didn't make any difference, one was to be able to have licensing. Licensing in those days did not exist because it took longer to build a toy than it did to make a movie. And the movie would come out and last, if it didn't work, it'd last for a month. Oh yeah,
Kenner was huge when Star Wars came out. Because Kenner was the main toy maker that made all the Star Wars toys and so forth. I don't know about the business side of it, but nevertheless, they were the ones that were responsible for doing that. I assume this is how all that came down.
And they wanted something that would last for a year so they could, sell their toys at Christmas and all that kind of stuff. And all I wanted to do was to make T-shirts and posters and use it for advertising. So I could go to Disneyland and sell kids Star Wars T-shirts and all this kind of stuff. And we were going to conventions. To a friend of mine from school, Charlie Levengoff.
That's just crazy. He just wanted to make T-shirts
and
posters.
We were a very small group, but he was sort of doing all the prep for that. But we went to Star Trek conventions, and all the science fiction things, the Comic-Cons, all those things where we thought there would be people who would be interested in this movie. And for 2 years before the movie came out, we were selling it at all these places. So when the movie came out, the studio was completely like, where did all these people come from? How did they, because they weren't actually advertising it. We were, had T-shirts and posters, and they had
Ground Roots movement.
But that was the reason, because everybody said, oh, you were so smart. It was like such a good idea. Well, I had already, when I wrote Star Wars, it was too long. It wasn't 500 pages, it was like 210 or something. But I said, well, I can't make this into a movie. This is way too big. I need about 100 pages. And that's when I rewrote, I wrote the first act, basically. And that's why I demanded that I wanted the sequel rights, because they weren't, if they were going to sit on it, I've already been through this before, where they would sit on something and then say, well, we don't want to do it, but we're not.
Wow, camera movement.
We're not going to sell it to you, but if we do, we'll sell it to another studio for an ungodly amount of money. And of course, they won't buy it because I could barely sell it as I was. So I said, I want the sequel rights. And of course, the first rule you learn in film school or anywhere else, don't ever invest in movies. You will lose your money. The fact that people make money in the movie business is a myth. It doesn't happen.
Really?
Especially in Hollywood. It's just like, I can tell you 10% of the net of so-and-so in this movie, and it stars Tom Cruise, but you'll never see a dime. So, and I knew that, but I did want to get the rights because I didn't want them to sit on it. And not let me, because I would say, well, I'll make 3 movies out of this now because there's too much material there for me to do. And that's what started that whole Star Wars craziness. And so.
And that's how we got episodes 4, 5, and 6.
It was the deal of the century, what you've done with Star Wars. But do you realize that now it's impossible to get this kind of stories? I mean, not a studio will put money on such a big movie if it's not an IP or if it's not a comic book, if it's not something that people know. And for a young kid arriving in the business and saying, getting what you got, it's impossible. So what could the George Lucas of today do to make the Star Wars of today?
Well, it was impossible to do it then, really. I mean, to ask, the only way I managed to get a lot of the deal, which, again, there was no money in licensing. The studio didn't have a licensing department. It was just like, oh, we don't do that. Maybe Planet of the Apes because it's a TV series, and so we can do that. But there was no money in it. It was just like, oh, well, it's kind of, we do it. But that's the thing that is like, it didn't mean anything to them. And the sequel rights, their attitude was, well, we don't like this movie. It's really terrible, and it's stupid. So what do we care about the sequel rights? Because the studio's going to get sold anyway. So we won't.
Sip them if you got them. Gotta stay hydrated. Don't forget to sip.
It won't go anywhere. They had no faith in it whatsoever. And as I say, even when the stockholders, the board of directors saw it, they said, this is terrible, let's sell it. And so part of it was I had a script and a thing that nobody wanted, and I had a couple of people who were my champions, which was Laddie and Ashley Boone and people. It's like, so they didn't care. They just said, well, this isn't worth anything. There is no licensing, not in a movie. He'll never get that license for anything, except maybe t-shirts and posters, which, with that, he'll make maybe $20,000. So that's the deal. But I knew when I did, I said, even with American Graffiti, I said, there was another one of those in American Graffiti, which is when we started to finish the movie, we went to Universal and we said, and we were buying the rights to all, there's 70 songs in that movie, pop songs. And they said,
wow, 70 songs?
For another $3,000 a song, we can get the album rights to all the songs in the movie. They said, we don't want those, we don't want those, we don't want those. So when the movie came out, it was a giant, huge hit. They went out and spent like $2 or $3 million just to get the rights for the album. And then they did 2 albums. It's like, that was Hollywood then. I don't really know. I've been retired for 10 years. I'm not sure what it's like now. But,
yeah.
They weren't they didn't really understand the business the way somebody who's on the ground does. And the people on the ground, director, writer, if you say, I'm going to make this movie no matter what, and people have done it, you can actually do it. And now there are a lot more with streaming. It's very easy. It was easy. Now it's not. They shut it down. But it was that they were throwing money around like crazy. And so if you had a crazy movie and you could say, well, I can make this into 4 movies, you could pretty much get a deal. But now they're, backed off. So it's not quite as easy as it was. But the secret to the whole thing, ultimately, is persistence, which was in the movie. It's the only, and I battled it for 2 or 3 years, 4 years for each movie. And I just kept pushing and not giving up because I was passionate about the film. And I didn't really care about the deal. I just cared about getting to make the movie. It was from film school. All we did was, our passion was to make the movie. We didn't care. And we were hoping that somebody wouldn't figure out the secret, which is for film students and
right.
You'll
see, he just cares about making his art, which I totally get that in a way. Because this little penguin likes doing his little penguin stuff.
Pay to make the movie. I'll pay you all I've got, $300. Or I'll do it for free, which is also a thing like with Jim Cameron, who I became friends with, who, when he did Titanic and went over, he had 50% on that, but it was going over budget, way and over time, and he finally said, look, I'll do this film, but I will give up my percentage, which they can't, if you're going to give them something, they can't resist it. He said, I'll give you all my percentage. And he did the same thing on the next film that he did. And he said, you're crazy. What are you doing? This is nuts. He said, but I want to make my movie. I want to make my movie. I said, it's not going to make any difference to them. Yes, they're not going to shut it down. I said, there's a secret to making movies. If you're halfway through and you've spent a ton of money, and they did the Star Wars, they cut me off because they said,
All right, I'm going to pause it here, and I'm going to take about a good 2 or 3 minute break. I just ran out of iced coffee, and I can't sip anymore. So give me about 2 or 3 minutes to take this opportunity to sip, or get up and go to the little penguin's room, or stretch, or slap your neighbor with a fish, whatever. Either way, I'll be back in about 2 or 3 minutes here, okay? Okay, Campers, I'm back. And hope you had the opportunity to get you some more coffee or take a break or something, or slap your neighbor with a fish. Anyway, as always, sip them if you got them. And I've got more iced coffee to sip. So let's continue watching the rest of this. And we'll get into, back it up just a tad, since he starts talking about Star Wars here again. I kind of really want to just watch the stuff about Star Wars. So I may skip around to some of this stuff. Like Apocalypse Now, I'll probably skip that. Star Wars and Vietnam War, I don't know. Anyway, let's get into it.
You know, there's a secret to making movies. If you're halfway through and you've spent a ton of money, and they did this Star Wars, they cut me off because they said it was, you know, Fox was going out of business. They said, you've got to finish in 3 weeks. I mean, I was 1 week over. And they said, well, you can't go over anymore. I said, but I still have the whole opening of the film. When Darth Vader arrives with Princess Leia, it sets up the plot. This is all, you have to have this. You can't start without that. And they said, well, you know, you gotta stop. And so I said, you know,
wow.
I can get that shot, but I'm gonna have to work 24 hours a day with 3 new crews, and it's gonna cost you a lot more than if you just let me go the 3 weeks instead of cutting it up at 1 week. And so I said, you know, they said, look, just stop when we say, because what they wanted to do is the announcement in the trades that said Star Wars is finished, and they finished shooting. That's an important thing for them. It doesn't mean anything because I did get all these crews, and it did cost them, you know, Star Wars, the budget, the original budget, which was, you know, what it actually costs, just like building a building. You say, well, this is the lumber, these are the people, they're gonna work this many weeks, and this is how much they get paid.
And see, that's the difference between a
producers just scamming them,
producer, a business-oriented person that's all thinking about the bottom line, the PR, and the money, and George is thinking about his movie.
When I gave him the budget of $13 million, they said, it's got to be under 10. And I said, I can't do it for under 10. I said, you know, I'm not going to cut stuff out of the script. And he said, well, look, just make the movie. That was Laddie. He said, we'll figure that out. So it came out, and it was $13 million. And so they were really excited about the fact that it was, you know, 10 days over or 2 weeks over from what they said, which, you know.
Is he being sarcastic that they were really excited that they were 10 days over? And over budget to what they wanted to spend on it?
It was just, they didn't understand that isn't a way you save money by just cutting it off. You don't get a movie, you know, it's just, that world, I'm not sure if it still exists, but it kind of still exists, meaning it's impossible, and you just have to have the passion and the persistence to continue to do what you need to do to get the movie made the way you want it. Now, I'm famous for being a bit of I want things to be perfect. I don't want to have a movie out there that's half-assed.
A perfectionist.
So that is why, I don't know if this is a question yet, but that is why I went back after Star Wars, or it was even after that, it was after the 3 Star Wars, when I was
he's talking about special editions.
Experimenting with digital technology and trying to build a digital pipeline so we could make digital movies. And so the movies, I said, they're things that were never finished. They were just movies get abandoned. They don't get finished unless you're Stanley Kubrick or somebody. Otherwise, they just say stop and that's it. And
yeah, the special editions, like, I don't know if you remember or not, but them changing the way, like, adding the part about Jabba there at the Falcon with Han, or Death Star's special effects blowing up and so forth. That's the kind of stuff he felt like, I guess, wasn't finished or didn't really come out when the first movie was made, and he went back and wanted to fix it, or at least add to it. And that's why they've got the special editions, which I kind of like the special editions a little bit. Nothing beats the original, but I do like the special editions as well. They kind of add something to it, I think.
So I had a lot of stuff in there that didn't get finished, that I wanted to finish. And then when we developed digital technology, I said, well, we can go back and fix a lot of these things. The things were like stupid things that only a filmmaker cares about, which is in a lot of the movies, especially in Empire Strikes Back, because it was white on white, the matte lines around the characters was very extreme. I thought it was extreme. I'm sure the movie came out, nobody cared, but I cared. I didn't want to have
That's
that.
my favorite Star Wars
movie.
movie.
Things like that. And I had shot
Empire Strikes Back is the best, baby.
Jabba the Hutt, that we ran out of time, we ran out of money, and we didn't have the technology to actually do it because it was we were working on the design of a big slug. And I had just shot it with a stand-in there to do it. And I said, I want that scene back because now Jabba the Hutt's going to be, because he's in the other movies. And this is a good way to set it up. I should have, that's why I put it in there in the first place. It was one of those things where I said, cut. Anything that's expensive. And that was when we didn't really have an answer about how we were going to do it. So.
About that, and we'll come back about the making of Star Wars in a minute. I opened the question to fans on the web, and Nicola Michalski is asking, many of them revere the VHS of Laserdisc of the original version of the first Star Wars. Are you going to release one day a Blu-ray or a 4K version of the original one? Or
well, we did release the original one on a Laserdisc. And everybody got really mad. They said, well, it looks terrible. I said, I know it did. One of the big things when we redid the movies is that the color and the movies had faded. They were terrible. They were scratched up. There were no real copies. We took the best copies we could from all over the world, which is the way you restore movies. They were still kind of bad. And so the big deal was to restore the actual, which is what we do with the Film Foundation. We take old movies and then restore them so they look great. And that was really the impetus of it. And I said, well, since we're going to do that, I want to fix all the things that I didn't get to finish. And so I did that. That was the reasoning behind all that. Now,
yeah,
if they want to see it on
restore his movies.
I looked at the Laserdisc. I mean, it was on one of the VHSs that we released, and it looked terrible. And they said, "Well, this is terrible. You purposely made it terrible. You made it." I said, "We didn't. That is what it looked like, and it cost just to do the rehab of the movie. Each movie was $6 million." I said,
wow.
I'm trying to make movies, and I can't. That's a lot of money, and I wanted to fix them at the same time, which we were doing experiments with digital to see what we could actually do, and ILM was learning how to do digital technology, so there were a lot of reasons behind, and
I wonder, I'm just curious, how much money did the Star Wars special editions well, he definitely got his money back on that because he said he put $6 million at each one of them, and episode 5 made 67,000 lifetime gross. Wow. Cool. Anyway, I was just curious. I had to find out.
I'm a firm believer that the director, or the writer, or the filmmaker should have a right to have his movie be the way he wants it. It goes all the way back, to, Michelangelo. He worked on a scaffolding. He did it. It took him.
Yeah,
6
it's art.
months to do a section. Then he finally came down. And they removed the scaffolding. He looked at it. Nah, we're going to redo that. A whole ceiling. So I don't think I was that outrageous. But that's what, when you're working on something and you create it, you want it to be right. You don't want it to be not right. Sorry, man.
I'm going to tell you a little personal story, but I'm pretty sure that a lot of people in this room have the same. I saw the first one. I was a kid, and when the music starts, when the
yes. Talking about John Williams' score. Oh yeah, baby.
Really.
Now see, this is the part. This right here is one of the things I have a trouble with Disney about when it comes to Star Wars. They don't understand the concept that John Williams' music was another character in the overall story of Star Wars. In my opinion, one of the most important characters in all the original Star Wars movies. It made you feel certain ways when it happened. For example, the one that always comes to my mind is when in episode 4 when Ben is fighting Vader and Vader strikes him down. When Ben turns off his lightsaber and gets struck down, and you feel that same emotion that Luke did when he saw that happen, and the John Williams score just kind of punches that in and emphasizes that even more. So it's like drawing you into that moment, not just feeling it, but feeling like you're experiencing the same thing that Luke is going through, that his mentor has been killed by Vader. And the music does that. Oh, just so good. Anyway, see, that's the kind of stuff they don't do at Disney. I don't think they get it. Oh, it just floors me. Sorry. Sip, calm down, Bob. Calm down. This little Star Wars penguin, it gets worked up sometimes. Because I love Star Wars. I don't like Disney Star Wars. I love Star Wars. Lucas is a Star Wars so much. It's been so part of my life. Oh. Yeah, rambling Bob. All right. I've taken a sip. I'm chilling out again. Let's get back to it.
Can be. My question is pretty simple. What was your reaction when you listened to John Williams' music for the first time?
I loved it. Well, Steve, I was talking to Steve and I was saying,
Steven Spielberg.
Steve Spielberg. I got this.
Well, I had to clarify that. He just said talking to Steve, like so casual. Steve Spielberg, yes, exactly.
He said, well, what are you going to do about music? And I said, well, this is like, the movie is like it was made in the 30s. It's a Republic serial, from the script to the dialogue to the music to everything. And in those movies, they use classical music.
Yeah.
And I said, I want to do it, but I want to do it more like Peter and the Wolf. I want each character to have their own theme song, and I want to then, it needs to be a full orchestra. which in those days, we said, well, you're going to do it with a synthesizer, right? You're going to do, you're going to do rock and roll. I said, no, we're going to do a 1930s score.
It wouldn't be a space opera without John Williams' score.
By that time, I managed to get that through. But Steven said, you want John Williams. I said, but he's kind of a jazz guy. No. He can do classical music. You don't know he knows him as a classical composer, but he is. I said, okay.
And now everybody knows who John Williams is.
Okay. But when I walked onto we did it at Abbey Road in England, and I hadn't heard it with a full orchestra. And when I heard it with a full orchestra, I went, oh my God. This is, it's just exactly what anybody would do when they hear those scores. Because I'm a firm believer, and I say this even from my first on THX, I said, sound is half the movie. And
I can tell you right now, from one of the things I've learned so much about just making content, it's one thing that the picture should look good, but people want the audio to sound even better. Audio is more important than video. And in this case, that's the thing that I think that Disney's got it backwards. They want to do all these special effects and make it look nice and shiny, whiz bangs and everything, which granted some of that stuff's cool looking, but if you don't have the audio to back it up, the music to bring the emotion, to bring the feeling out, to make you feel like you're watching Star Wars and not some Disney Plus show, it just loses its effect. It's not as important. I 100% agree with what he's saying here.
It's the half that is the least expensive to do. So you get 50% of the results for maybe 25% of the cost. So, and people just say, well, no, the soundtrack would always get thrown to the end. The composer would say, well, do this. They didn't really spend a huge amount of time sorting it out. Where I always have, Walter Merchant and I went to school together, and he was a sound guy, and he was an editor, and he made movies. He had a real sense of humor as a writer. Francis, when we moved to San Francisco, and we had the Rain people, he said, I got this great Steenbeck mixing machine that I got from Denmark. It's going to be shipped in here, because we had a little tiny place. And we'll be able to mix our own movies, and it'll be fantastic. And he said, do you know anybody who knows how to mix movies?
I'll tell you this much. Whenever I think of John Williams, it brings back memories of my childhood. There's a friend of mine that I grew up with, that he was into Star Wars just as much as I was, to the point to where he actually owned a lot of John Williams music on vinyl. And we used to spend our summers listening to John Williams music while doing whatever else we were, messing around with. You'd be at Legos or playing board games or something like that. But it was just, it's just that important. For me personally, as a penguin, I can't emphasize enough just how important John Williams' music is to Star Wars. You take it out, it's no longer Star Wars. Anyway.
I said, I got just the guy. And we sent him to Sausalito to live on a little houseboat, and he mixed the movies. And then he mixed my movies. He did America Creative. And, it's...
wow, that was a little jarring.
That is why the films are as good as they are. It's because there's been a huge attention to
but good to see a lot of people there.
And it's the soundtrack is important. It creates, it's the secret sauce that makes
exactly
the come out.
This explains.
it's what makes the movie have depth, have emotion,
When
feeling.
Star Wars, you hope, but Star Wars at the time becomes the biggest success ever. How do you?
We're gonna skip Apocalypse now. Let's go ahead and skip to Star Wars and the Vietnam War.
And the Star Wars phenomenon. The explanation.
So Star Wars is for kids who are 12 years old. It's always been designed that way. And it's for kids during the Vietnam War, where all of us were about to be drafted and people were coming back in coffins, friends and things. And we were marching against, you know, the civil rights movement was going on. There were a lot of things that were very dark. And we said, I said, you know, I want to make something, because American Graffiti was so powerful for kids that I said, well, I don't, you know, I want to make another kids movie for 12-year-olds that are going through puberty, that don't know what they're doing, why they're here, asking all the questions about what should I be worried about, what should I think about, what's important. And Star Wars has all those things in there. They're buried in there, but you definitely get it if you're especially if you're young.
Yep.
And of course, the people that loved the movie were all somewhere between 10 and 15 years old. And then, you know, so it was hard in the end because I wanted to do the prequels, but I knew that, you know, I was just going to do whatever I wanted. I wasn't going to make something that would be try to be a bigger hit than Star Wars. So I did 1, 2, and 3, and 1, which got completely trashed. When 1 came out, it was the beginning of the internet.
Tracy says the Vietnam War was over when the first movie was released. Interesting, yeah, but it left its scars on society and culture at that time. I mean, to a certain extent, it still does even today.
Things like that I couldn't possibly do with a puppet.
I could see how
so we had to come up with
it played into this, and he wanted to make something a little more hopeful. I get that.
Visual effects we could do that we couldn't do before. So we did it, and of course, the critics and the fans who had been 10 years old when they saw the first one, and then they were 13, and then they were 16. It's a children's film. I don't want to see a children's film. You know, it's terrible. That Jar Jar is terrible. I said, you know, everybody said the same thing about 3PO. That guy's so irritating. Why don't you get rid of him? There was a huge thing about getting.
Yeah, but 3PO is the straight man to R2's funny man. It's the way it's always been. I mean, think about it. Whenever you see R2-D2 and 3PO together, 3PO is normally complaining about something or complaining about what R2 is doing. R2 often gets into trouble and is funny about doing it. And 3PO is kind of like the straight man to that. So but it's still what I remember my two boys when I first introduced them to Star Wars. It's what they fell in love with too was 3PO and R2-D2 at first because it's kids. Matter of fact, my boys even like Jar Jar a little bit. My youngest did. Although I think his favorite still was Chewbacca. I don't blame him. Chewbacca was pretty cool. But nevertheless, I could take or leave Jar Jar. But you know what? In the light of, I remember when the prequels came out, I went to the theaters and saw them, and I thought, yeah, they're not as great as the original. And I know over the years, a lot of people hated the prequels. But I'm thinking they're looking a whole lot better in the light of the sequels and everything that Disney has produced. I definitely like Revenge of the Sith. And that's because we really get to see Anakin's turn to Vader. Matter of fact, to this day, whenever I see that scene where you see Anakin being turned into Vader and you hear him breathe for the first time, it gives me goosebumps and makes my feathers stand up on end. I'm telling you, it's just like, ooh, it's bone chilling. I love it.
Rid of 3PO. And then when I did the third one, the Ewoks, they said, well, those are little teddy bears, those are little kids. This is a kids movie. We don't want to see a kids movie. We want to see an adult film. I said, it's a kids movie. It's always been a kids movie.
Star Wars has always been a kids brand. It has. He's not wrong.
I was as surprised as anybody in the first one and the first three that everybody from 5 years old to 85 years old liked it, all over the world, everywhere. And that was, I said, wow. Because there are certain aspects of that movie which say, they would say, well, it's not, it's all white men. I said, it's not. Most of the people in there are aliens. And the idea is, you're supposed to accept people for what they are, even if they're big and furry, or whether they've got they're green and whatever. The idea is all of the people are equal. The only people which was in there, are the robots. Well, you can't come in here. We don't like your kind here. So they were the only ones that were discriminated against, and that was a way of saying, people always discriminate against something, and sooner or later, that's what's going to happen. And we're already starting it with AI, saying, well, we can't trust those robots. I do it every day. I take my temperature. I have my, all my vital signs, things. If it comes out wrong, I just say, well, I don't trust the robots. Whatever it is, we'll do it again tomorrow. So, but that was a main part of that movie, was to make people realize that everybody is equal, no matter where they're from, no matter what they look like. That is the important thing.
Yes.
And the whole movie is that way.
Yes. Exactly.
They said, well, when they...
It's because, shocker, it was about a good story, not about the color of someone's skin or their sexual orientation or whether or not they were a white man or a black woman or whatever you want to throw out there, or whether or not they were a fish or a penguin or a stupid-looking shark that was cross-eyed, or even like, a mean old alligator that's toothless because he's been eating too many rocks. I don't know. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't matter because it's supposed to be about an immersive story. World building. Shocker. Writing a good story in a movie and not about some stupid political agenda. Okay, there's my rant again. Take a sip of iced coffee, Bob. Sip them if you got them. Okay, I'm chilled. It chills me out.
The critics kept saying, well, what we mean is there's no black people in the movie. Well,
what about Lando?
In the first one, there were a few Tunisians who were dark, but in the second one, I had, Billy D. Williams, and in the third one, and in the new ones, which they were also criticizing, I had Sam Jackson. He was like a...
Yeah, Mace Windu!
He wasn't a scoundrel, like...
like Lando was.
Yeah, like...
Lando.
But he was one of the top Jedi. He was like And he wanted to be in it so bad that all he really wanted was a purple sword. And so I said, great. No, but we paid him a regular salary. But the secret to Sam, who's a fantastic actor and has been in a gazillion movies, his agent said, don't tell him that, you know, we could get a big thing out of it. I said, look, it's a small part. It's the best I can do. I may be able to extend it to the other two movies because this could be a key character. And but he did it for very little. But I gave him a percentage, but it wasn't net. It wasn't gross, it was net. And for us, because I was financing them myself, net and gross were the same thing. So we did that. But the other part of it was they said later on, when they were making more movies, they said, there's no women in the movies. I said, who
Are you kidding me?
heroes are in those films? What do you
Princess
think
Leia
was?
Exactly.
She is the head of the rebellion. She's the one that's taking this young kid that doesn't know anything and this boisterous, I know everything guy who can't do anything.
Luke and Han.
Trying to save the rebellion with these clowns. I said, she's the hero of the movie. And it's the same thing with Queen Amidala. Even though she has Jedi on her side, she was still the hero prime mover. And they said, well, but there's no women, you know. I said, you can't just put a woman in pants and expect her to be a hero. You know, they can wear dresses, they can wear whatever they want. It's their brains and their ability to think and do and plan and be logistical, and you know that's
Once
what
again,
the hero is.
it's
You know,
about
yes,
the
all
character-driven
of them,
story
they couldn't do lightsabers,
and
but
not
they could shoot guns and they
politic-driven
could,
story.
you know, and we also did a thing where we didn't really we killed robots, stormtroopers, aliens, but we very rarely killed humans. You know, that was kind of an idea that goes through the movie, but everybody thinks of it as a movie where you kill everybody, but we don't.
I got a question from the internet by Mathieu Bayarjon, and I think it's a beautiful question. I don't know if you remember the Danny Boyle movie.
Empire Strikes Back and Disney Star Wars. Ooh, here we go.
Can you imagine a world without Star Wars?
Oh, I can't imagine a world without Star Wars. That'd be most of my childhood gone.
Yeah, I mean, it almost happened. And
Thank God it didn't.
it's, you know, when I sold the company, I just sort of said, because I had a baby girl, I got married, I had a different life, and I said, I'm gonna, you know, and I didn't, because I knew it would take me another 10 years to make those films. And I said, and I was 69, and I said, I'm not gonna be doing this when I'm 79. And I want, you know, it's time to let go and let somebody else do it. Even though, like with Empire Strikes Back and some, I ended up having to be on the set the whole time, but it's like, I was the only one that really knew what Star Wars was, and Gersh and I were really good friends, so it was like, you know, and so I was like the consultant, the advisor who actually knew the world, because there's a lot to it.
Well, he created the world.
Nobody understood the Force. Nobody, you know, what they do is, and then they started other ones when I sold the company, and they, you know, a lot of those ideas that were in there sort of got lost. But that's the way it is. If you give it up, you give it up.
I want to talk about your producer career. I mean, of course, you produced Star Wars, not directing them, Empire and Return, but you also produced, of course, Steven Spielberg and Indiana Jones, but not only. I mean, Kagemusha, I mean, Mishima, Ray Allen, and why was it important for you to produce this movie? Why is it important for you to give the voice to this filmmaker, to give the means to this filmmaker to make the movies they wanted?
What was that?
Why was it important for you?
I'd say I didn't quite get what you were saying either. That's okay.
To produce a movie like Kagemusha or Mishima or even Indiana Jones.
A lot of those are just real things of people who I know who are trying to make movies, and I think they should. And it's like, I was a huge fan of Kurosawa. I thought he was a genius, and he is, or was. And but Francis had him over. He came to San Francisco. Francis had him over for dinner. And we were talking and everything, and he was saying that he was trying to get a movie off the ground, but the studio wouldn't do it. And he wanted to do, it was like a test run for Ram, which had a lot of horses in it. And they said, you can't do a film with horses.
Don't forget to sip them if you have them.
And so that was really a thing of, I wanted him to make a movie. He hadn't made a movie in 10 years. And, he was sort of ostracized from the Japanese film industry. So I said, well, I'll see if I can get you the money. So what I did is I went to Laddie and Fox, and I said, you're not going to make any money on this movie, but it needs to get made. This, all filmmakers learn from Kurosawa. So think of it as a way of letting people have more examples of how you make movies. And so I got, millions out of them, and
wow,
to buy the foreign rights to the movie, because the Japanese had the Japanese rights. I said, so we sold them the foreign rights, which I don't know how they did, but at the same time, I already warned them that it was, this was a long shot. I did the same thing with, which Francis and I would go in on, which was Kagemusha, which was Reggio movie, which was more like what I used to do and that I like to do. So it was kind of my kind of movie. And Francis the first one. And so, we were doing movies that just, you couldn't get them made. And I did, it was the same thing with, why can't I remember his name? Who did the picture of us and put it on the wall? Yeah. He had a great idea for a movie. It was a great movie. I liked Philip Glass, he was doing it. And I said, this is great. And so I helped him. I actually helped Larry Kasdan get his first movie off the ground.
Yeah, we're almost done with this.
But I didn't put my name on. I didn't put my name on a bunch of movies because, like, that one was, body heat. It's like, I said, Larry, if I put my name on that movie, it's all going to be about me. It's all going to be about, me making these kinds of movies. And we don't want that. I want it to be you making this movie. And so but I did it a few times. But I did do Labyrinth because Jim and I got to be friends in England because his studio was right across the street from us. And so...
I didn't know he made the movie Labyrinth.
He needed some help on the script. I said, well, I'll help him.
Boy, it's been years since I've seen that movie.
So I did get involved in the film. But I love Jim Henson. I mean, was a genius. And, but a lot of those are like that. You say, this guy's great. I want to help him. I mean, big time, Jim Henson wasn't a small guy. Well, he's not even a small guy, but he did.
He was literally tall, yeah.
Get movies off the ground. And I wanted to help people who I thought were talented, who I thought I could use my pressure to make it happen.
What was that? You remind me of the babe with the power? What? You've lost me, Tracy. I'm not sure what you mean by that. Kind of wondering what that noise was. That was maybe like somebody in the background in the movie. I mean, in the film, in the video here.
A small guy.
Oh, Song in Labyrinth. Okay. See, I don't remember a whole bunch because I have not seen that movie in years.
Small guy, but he didn't, it was very hard to get movies off the ground. And I wanted to help people who I thought were talented, who I thought I could use my...
Yeah, that must be somebody's phone going off in the background. I couldn't figure out what that was. It's like, what is that? It sounds like somebody's weird ringtone or something.
pressure to make it happen somehow. And I did. So that's why I became a producer.
We don't have a lot more time, but I want to talk to you about what Terry said in the beginning, how much you are interested in the innovative aspect of cinema and how much it's important for you and how much you worked on that at the ranch. Why is that? Why are you so fascinated by that? And also, I want to have your opinion on the AI debate that we have now around cinema.
This should be interesting, what he thinks about AI.
You're asking about why the ranch?
No, yeah, that and why you are so much interested in the technological innovation. Why is that important for you, the digital and all the...
Well, most people don't, I don't know if most people realize or not, but he created a lot of the technology himself in the process of making all those films for Star Wars, especially like Return of the Jedi. He was responsible for making, I want to say, standardizing like 120 millimeter film when he was creating the special effect for, like, when the, and I may be totally wrong on all this. I don't remember. I'm doing this all from memory. But when he was doing like the speeder bike stuff, the way he was shooting that, he needed faster film, so that when he was slowing down, it gave the effect that the speeder bikes were going really fast. When he actually shot that in very, very slow time and just used a faster film to give that special effect. But that's just like one example of innovation. Yeah, THX is another one we know about. That is actually, a standard for theater sound. At least it is, or was. But I think even like the Dolby surround thing, that's still based off of THX even. But nevertheless, so for him to be involved in the technology, I totally understand this question the guy's asking him, because Lucas has been in years past all about pushing the technology forward to make his creative vision happen.
The stuff you do over there at the ranch, all the technical stuff.
Well, one, we're in San Francisco, and there wasn't a mixing facility up there. There were a few rock and roll ones because it was a bit of a rock and roll heaven, but there wasn't anybody who could actually do a big score like we do with a 180-piece orchestra, a big symphonic score. And we did it at Apple, but there was that and Dunham Studios. They were the only ones that were actually a live studio. The other ones were all, rock and roll dead studios. That just no sound. So the one we built was it can be a dead studio, but you can move the panels around and everything and make it a live studio.
Wow.
So that's why I built the studio, and to me, because I started out as an editor, that's the sound and the editing are the most important things. And
they are.
That's where you're actually, because I also did, some documentaries and that sort of thing, and so I'm very used to, here's a stack of film, make a movie out of it. And so we made an editing facility, we made a place where you could go to work without having a studio over your head. And there are a lot of people like...
Well, think about it. He was responsible for making ILM, Industrial Light and Magic, which is an industry standard for special effects on its own, in its own right. ILM was not just specific to Star Wars. It has been around for years, and it has been used in so many films over the years that when somebody needed to go a certain direction, when they needed certain special effects, ILM and Lucasfilm was the company. At least it was under Lucas. That you went to. It was the standard. I don't think as much is anymore with Disney.
Like that, so we would rent it out to people, and we still do. I mean, now the sound studio is owned by Disney. I own the building, but they own the thing. But it's, you know, it's like when you're up in San Francisco, I didn't want to have to go down to San Francisco, down to LA a lot. That's why in the beginning I was going to move ILM to San Francisco, but we needed to be near a lab because they had to do, because of the nature of the way you did film then, you had to process what you were shooting, to test things, and you needed it back in a few hours. And San Francisco didn't have that capability at all. So we started pushing the studio in San Francisco, and at the same time, I had to go down to LA all the time to do ILM. But as soon as we finished Star Wars, we moved ILM to San Francisco. And so it was always in San Francisco.
Was it your way to stay independent? Is that the biggest success of your career? You stayed independent all your life. You stay independent during all your career. Is that the biggest success of your life?
Well, I say it because I'm a stubborn guy. And I didn't want people telling me how to make my movies. You know, I just said,
Yeah, and I read that in that article earlier. That's kind of the reason why he went independent. And look, the movies he has made, especially Star Wars, I mean, it's his vision because he got to make it the way he wanted to make it. Right or wrong, it's his vision. It's his world he created.
it's that easy. I mean, I had a group of friends, you know, like Walter I went to school with, Marty Scorsese, Francis, Steve Spielberg. We're students at the same time, and we all know each other really well. So I know what their prejudices are, what the thing is, and I show them the movie, and they make comments, and I know where they're coming from, and so I can say, well, yeah, or that's a good idea, but that I don't like focus groups. I don't like previews. The preview is really for me and for the people that actually work on it to see if it works.
Well, Jar Jar, what was he thinking? Did he drop some sort of hat? I know what he was thinking. Jar Jar was another thing to try to make it a kids film, I think. He was trying to appeal to kids.
What kind of movie do you want to see?
To younger kids, I think.
The audience doesn't know what they want to see.
But I agree, yeah, what was he thinking?
I want to see something like
Me's be thinking, you be crazy, you're putting Jar Jar in these movies.
Star Wars. Well, that isn't an answer, really. It's like...
What? What did he say?
They want to see.
Back it up.
Very honest, but to do those kind of things they do afterwards where they ask people, well, what kind of movie do you want to see? Like, the audience doesn't know what they want to see. I want to see something like Star Wars. Well, that isn't an answer.
No,
really.
It's not.
It's like, I want more action. I want, you have to say, I'm going to make the movie, I'm going to do what I do, which is the way I do it, the way I like it. And then, but I'll pay attention to the audience. If they don't like something, we do those previews to say, oh, guess what? They didn't like that character. I wonder why. And so then we would kind of discuss.
See, notice he just said right there something that's kind of crucial, that not just Disney, but all these SJW and woke things are doing this day and age. They are not listening to the audience. They are not taking the feedback as, okay, they didn't like this, maybe we should do something different. Instead, they're just making it and say, if you don't like it, open up wider in the mouth and we're going to shove it down your throat whether you like it or not. And if you still don't take it, you throw it back and spit it back up at me, well, then you are the one that's got the problem. And that's not the way things work when you're a creative. George is right here. You adjust. You still try to make your creative vision, but at the same time, you do try to take some of the feedback into the process. It may not be exactly what everybody wants, but at the same time, at least you're listening. You're open to a dialogue with it.
What we can do, but so it's not completely not with the audience, but it's not. The studios go to the point where it's like they let the audience actually make the movie, and of course now they go crazy. That's what they do. It's all about what do the fans think. I said, you know, that isn't the way you make a movie. The way you make a movie is to find somebody that knows how to make movies, has a story to tell, is passionate about it, and makes the movie. You don't ask the housekeepers whether they like the movie. Really, I mean, I love the housekeepers. Francis let anybody come and see his cuts of some of the movies he did. And I said, Francis, they're not going to understand this movie. It's just not going to be something they understand. And but he would listen to anybody. He still does.
Monsieur Lucas, merci beaucoup.
There we go. Man, the myth, the legend. George Lucas. All right. Well, that was kind of a long one today and kind of a frustrating one because of the simple fact that I had to fight with my internet. I still don't know what's going on with all of it. At least it seemed to be a little bit more stable as we went further on. I still need to go and, I guess, figure out maybe what's happening here. Anyway, that's pretty much going to be it for me today. So we talked about the normal stuff that, you know, we always do about Disney failing. Shocker. That's nothing new. And how much I don't like Disney Star Wars. I don't. It's not Star Wars. There are bits and pieces there I like, but not something as a whole. None of it as a whole. I still love the original trilogy. It just, nothing beats it. It just really doesn't. To me, that is Star Wars. That is the crux of it. Empire Strikes Back. I don't know how many times I've seen that movie. That movie has got to be, in my opinion, the best of all the best of Lucas' Star Wars. I don't know. I just love it. I just can't. I don't get enough of it. I don't get tired of it. Anyway, so let me leave you with this one last thought here. Let me switch back to my thing here. I came across this verse earlier this week in one of my devotionals, and I thought I'd share this verse with you. It's one of my all-time favorites, and it's just something that I thought I'd leave you on. It's found in the book of Psalms 119, verse 105. And it says, your word, talking about God's word, is a lamp to guide my feet and a light for my path. And that is definitely true. God's word is a giant flashlight for our lives. So there you go. There you go, people. Get into God's word. It'll show you the path you need to take. And hopefully it'll steer you away from Disney Star Wars and to good content instead. Anyway, I'm a crazy little penguin that sins and wants to ramble on all the time, and I need to go track down some fish and slap them and so forth, because, you know, fish uprising is still going on, peoples. You got to get ready for it. Anyway, I will catch you all later. I'm the crazy little penguin named Whataboutbob, and I'm out the window because the door is shut. And this time's been duct taped by those fish. I'm telling you right now, they shouldn't have got the tape for the ducks. I don't know why they did that. But nevertheless, catch you later, peeps. Bye.